Hello there. Tonight, we begin our long, sleepy descent into the world of Viking intimacy, not with passion or poetry but with peat fires and the scent of pickled fish. Climate of courtship. The Vikings lived in a climate where romantic mood lighting was just low visibility due to fog. Winters were harsh, so affection often meant sharing warmth. And fleas. Thick-wooled tunics were not just fashion, they were the only barrier between your skin and someone else's drafty affections. Domestic delights homes, known as longhouses, were long, dark, and communal. Privacy, utterly theoretical. Animal companions included goats, pigs, and cows, often inside the house. Listening to your crush snore next to a milking cow was peak romantic ambiance. Scent of the times. Deodorant wasn't invented, but strong fish stew did serve as an olfactory deterrent for unwanted advances. Bathing was rare, but when done, involved rivers so cold and made flirting impractical. Scented oils were prized imports, meaning only the rich smelled vaguely like anything other than wet wool. Lighting the mood candlelight came from animal fat, meaning even romance smelled like bacon. Fireside tales of the gods often included mildly erotic myths, told in front of your entire extended family. Bedding, such as it was, beds were wooden frames stuffed with straw and disappointment. Couples slept under fur, possibly with 3 other relatives, and a dog, whispering sweet nothings meant, hoping no one else heard it. The emotional climate. Vikings didn't express love loudly, they grunted affection through shared chores. Gifting a comb or a brooch, a sign of deep, possibly inconvenient emotional commitment. Love letters were rare. Carving a flirtatious rune on a stone and leaving it near someone's livestock was more common. Vikings didn't date, they negotiated. Courtship involved detailed talks between families where dowries were less about jewelry, more about sheep, ale, and woolen undergarments. The more livestock you could offer, the hotter your marital prospects. To oxen, he's dreamy. Love by livestock suitors were judged not by poetry, but by property usually hairy and prone to wandering off. Bringing gifts of cheese or mead could signify interest. Bringing a goat, a serious proposal. One saga mentions a man wooing his bride with a particularly fat pig. Romantic oinks were likely exchanged. Contracts, not compliments. Viking law required formal contracts before marriage, sealed with witnesses, runnerstones, and sometimes awkward silence. Parents often arranged unions with attention to land lineage, and whether the bride's uncle still held a grudge over that axe incident. Finding a mat's town, festivals, market days, and regional things were prime meeting grounds. Some villages even had matchmakers who doubled as midwives. Efficiency was valued. Personal hygiene was optional, but owning boots without holes earned bonus romantic interest. Feasting and flirting courtship often culminated in a family feast featuring fish soup and tactful seating arrangements. Glances across a roasted duck could be subtle signals of desire or, if the couple could tolerate eating beside each other without insult, the gods were surely smiling. Symbolic gifts and odd tokens. Combs were precious and symbolized both grooming and emotional vulnerability. Elaborate brooches hinted at wealth, simpler ones at humility or a lack of better options. One documented courtship involved gifting a cloak woven from horsehair, the Viking equivalent of, "I made this for you." Don't ask how long it took. The Viking langus was long, unimaginatively rectangular. Think boat turned sideways, with hay, walls made of turf, timber, and sometimes dreams of better insulation. One shared living space for everything: sleeping, cooking, birthing, arguing, and occasionally seduction beneath a smoked fish rack. The hearth of half-hearted heat, positioned dead center. The hearth was the house's emotional and thermal nucleus. Families gathered here, so attempts at flirtation usually happened within earshot of an uncle braiding onions. Smoke vented poorly, coating romance in a light marinade of soot. Sleeping arrangements, group snuggle optional. Beds were plank boxes stuffed with straw and lumpy sacks of feathers, positioned along the walls like poorly planned romance stations. Privacy was mythical. Curtains were rare, and if you had one, it probably doubled as your funeral shroud. Couples didn't whisper sweet nothings. They mouthed them discreetly while avoiding cow eyes across the room. Animal companions, mood killers, on hooves. Livestock often shared space indoors during cold seasons, making passionate conversations smell faintly of goat. Waking up to a chicken sitting on your romantic interests. Head wasn't uncommon. Oxen were notorious for interrupting cuddle sessions with deeply confused stares. Weatherproofing and emotional leakage, roofs leaked, especially when it rained, which it did a lot. Romantic tension often fizzled out when someone had to hold a bucket over the bed. Wooden floorboards warped, creaked, and cried with every movement like judgmental relatives beneath your feet. Storage, decor, and the subtle art of not impressing anyone decoration was utilitarian. Pots, spears, and runes that doubled as legal disclaimers. Furs were used for warmth, status, and as passive-aggressive love barriers. The scent of dried fish, leather, and body heat could be described as not unpleasant if you liked discomfort. Marriage in Viking society wasn't personal, it was contractual. Families forged agreements outlining dowries, property, and future offspring duties. A bride's value could be tallied in silver, livestock, and how well she folded tunics. Wedding contracts, less romance, more risk management known as breakup. Weddings were sealed with verbal promises, iron rings, and community gossip. Witnesses had to attend, and here the term's privacy was neither expected nor encouraged. Failure to fulfill these terms could lead to legal disputes, or public ridicule involving poetic insults. Infidelity investigations. Viking law punished adultery. Variably men were often forgiven, women rarely. Accusations had to be backed by witnesses, or a weirdly specific rune carving left outside the bedroom. Some sagas mention trials where suspects swore on Thor's hammer, while maintaining eye contact with judgmental elders. Divorce. Norse-style women could initiate divorce for reasons like neglect, abuse, or excessive nose-picking. The process involved declaring intent publicly 3 times, in a row, loudly. Asses were divided based on the contract, with livestock assigned diplomatically. She gets the fat goat, he takes the anxious chicken. Legal runes and passive-aggressive contracts and decisions were carved into stones, or recorded by lost speakers who had terrifying memories and dramatic delivery. Love disputes sometimes appeared in sagas as epic side quests, involving curses, grudges, and that time someone threw a comb out of spite. Public assemblies of emotional chaos. The thing was where laws were made. Lovers, accused, and awkward silences. Imagine airing your romantic grievances in front of half your village, plus 12 sheep, and a guy who only showed up to sell Sometimes duels settled issues, because nothing says healthy conflict resolution like swordplay near the soup cart. The thing was, the Viking version of parliament, therapy, and a town square all rolled into one. Free men assembled to pass laws, settle disputes, and make important announcements like, "He promised me 2 goats, and gave me 1 bring the rune scribe." It wasn't optional. If you had a romantic dispute, it might end up here, possibly next to a trial about axe theft. Love and the time of public speaking. Marriage negotiations often finalized at the thing, with witnesses, rune carvers, and that one guy who always brought mead but never contributed to conversations. If someone opposed the union, they could speak, loudly, dramatically, sometimes while eating a turnip. Romantic oaths, occasionally sworn aloud. One saga references a man declaring his love between arguments about infidelity, and the gossip gauntlet accusations were serious. Business and faithfulness was aired publicly, and someone's aunt definitely chimed in. Witnesses presented, details repeated, and stones carved to remember the event for centuries. Resolution might involve compensation, or the angry throwing of cheese across the assembly floor. Crowd dynamics. How many people heard your problems? Imagine confessing romantic confusion in front of farmers, traders, warriors, and someone selling elk jerky nearby. Emotions were subdued, reactions stoic, but afterward, expect sideways glances and Sega-worthy judgment at the tavern. Rune records, and the bureaucratic blush outcomes etched into stone or wood. If your heartbreak made it into the records, congratulations now. Goats in 3 villages know your business. Some runestones survive today, documenting disputes like Bjorn took Ingrid's comb without consent and refused marriage terms, witnessed by Gorm and 1 chicken. Rituals, feasts, and slightly forced celebrations. Once unions approved, feasts followed. There was dancing, storytelling, and sometimes a dramatic retelling of that one failed courtship. Newlyweds received gifts like fur cloaks, salted fish, and unsolicited advice from elders. If the romance was controversial, expect someone to toast ironically during dinner. Magic was the Vikings' spiritual toolkit used for everything from predicting harvests to encouraging conception. Fertility spells often involved chanting, rhythmic drumming, and dramatic use of elk parts. No one wrote down why antlers helped, but if you waved one dramatically under moonlight while shouting about Freya, it couldn't hurt. Ritual ingredients and emotional root vegetables. Herbs used in fertility rites included angelica, lovage, and things that smelled like despair. Some rituals required wearing animal skins or dancing near fields, a romantic gesture that confused livestock and terrified neighbors. Love potions were brewed with roots and mead. Side effects included hiccups and unsolicited proposals. Animal symbolism and awkward involvement. Swans were symbols of purity and potential love. Elk represented virility. Frogs were accidental. Offerings of animal fat, milk, or well-groomed sheep were common. If the gods responded, it was usually via fog or bird droppings. One myth mentions a priestess using a goose feather to summon warmth between hesitant lovers. Goose was unavailable for comment. The seer's role in romance. Vulvas guided people through rituals with vague metaphors and excellent eye contact. Their prophecies included phrases like, "The soil sings beneath you, and he shall bring 3 pigs and uncertain feelings." Seers respected consent, but occasionally arranged marriages by interpreting cloud shapes. Divine intervention and sexy mythos. Freya and Freya, gods of fertility and love, were invoked often, usually by shouting their names while standing in puddles. Loki was never invited, yet always showed up. His rituals involved deception and unexpected nudity. The gods' own love affairs were woven into sagas. Most involved shape-shifting, mistaken identities, and impromptu swan transformations. Communal rites and the midnight spoon circle. Fertility festivals featured fireside chants, food sharing, and the spoon circle, a tradition in which participants pass carved spoons while reciting dramatic love lines like, "May your turnips be ever multiplied." Occasionally a couple was chosen to represent fertility by lying under a ceremonial fir while people respectfully looked away and pretended it was raining. Vikings did bathe, but not often, and mostly for special occasions like feast days, marriages, or particularly pungent eclipses. Weekly baths were encouraged by some. Others saw them as excessive luxury or witchcraft. Rivers were common bath sites, leading to encounters with leeches, frogs, and judgmental herons, tools of cleansing and ambiguity. Soap was made with animal fat and like cleansing, but with the vague scent of suffering. Combs were sacred grooming tools, often ornately carved and exchanged as romantic gifts. Nothing said "I see you" like a lice-free scalp. Tooth cleaning involved chewing sticks, rinsing with mead, and pretending cavities didn't exist. Smell politics, the unspoken war of odors. Personal aroma was a social identifier. Warriors smelled of leather and campfire. Seers smelled like questionable incense. Those who smelled pleasant were seen as wealthy, blessed, or suspicious. Rumors spread based on scent alone. "He smells of birch. He must be sleeping with the Intimacy and olfactory negotiation. Before cuddling, many lovers offered cloaks, herbs, or polite distance. Marriages sometimes included clauses about bathing frequency. Violations could lead to public embarrassment or ticked-off goats. One saga describes a failed romance due to foot odor, bewitched the oxen and sent them running. Perfume and imported prestige. Rare perfumes were imported from the East, usually reserved for noble classes or someone courting above their station. Applying scented oil was an elaborate ritual involving silence, feathers, and not sneezing. If you smelled exotic, you were either irresistible or a walking lie. Communal baths and the politics of steam. Some settlements had shared bathhouses, steamy wooden rooms, where men discussed poetry and foot fungus. Bath rituals sometimes doubled as matchmaking events. Steam hid flaws, and sweat suggested fertility. The phrase "he steams honorably" was documented once. No one knows what it meant. Viking women could own land, manage households, and initiate divorce while also brewing mead and disciplining goats. They wielded status through lineage, wealth, and strategic eyebrow raises. A woman presenting a man with thale at a feast could signify courtship or signal an impending legal clause. Men, stoic, hairy, occasionally sentimental, expected to be providers, protectors, and emotionally silent until death or until their sheep ran away. Expressions of love were deeply buried, often shown through actions like repairing the roof or not trading your partner for a marginally nicer tunic. Warriors practiced poetry, often about bloodshed, occasionally about longing, and once, confusingly, about ducks. Emotional expression, romantic affection was subtle. A well-placed brooch, a compliment about bread-making, or shared silence during a storm. Open declarations of love were rare, best reserved for deathbed speeches or slightly intoxicated rune carving. Crying was acceptable only during funerals, battles, or while eating particularly strong onions. Grooming and gender signals. Men prized elaborate beard care. A well-oiled beard was a sign of status and romantic viability. Women braided hair with ornaments, each braid often representing lineage, mood, or ongoing passive aggression. One love triangle allegedly ended when a man failed to properly comb his beard. History is unclear whether it was love or lice that ended him. Expectations in marriage. Wives managed everything from firewood to social alliances, and occasionally won arguments via sarcasm and superior rune knowledge. Husbands brought home goods from raid-sidal gifts, included rare spices, furs, and a chair that doesn't wobble like your brother's personality. Love was less fireworks, more consistent mutual respect over intimacy and the spoon paradox. Cuddling, known as spooning, may have originated in Viking culture, though often done to survive hypothermia, not romantic tension. Sharing a bed meant negotiating space with pets, relatives, and that one itchy blanket no one liked. Emotional closeness, built slowly like carving a ship from a log while someone critiques your technique. Going on a raid wasn't just about wealth, it was a chance to prove one's strength, bravery, and ability to return with something more valuable than a broken helmet. The more successful the raid, the more attractive the warrior, especially if he brought back a decent comb and didn't develop lice. It was said a man who could swing a sword, steer a ship, and recite poetry without vomiting was highly desirable. Long ships, love boats with swords. Long ships were sleek, intimidating, and surprisingly fast, ideal for surprise flirtations and dramatic entrances. A decorated prow with fierce carvings signified power. Add a few stolen brooches, and suddenly you had a seaworthy dating profile. The rhythmic rowing and shared danger built intense bonds between raiders and platonic, some poem-worthy. Pheromones and the myth of musky bravery. No confirmed Viking cologne existed, but oral tradition suggests warriors smelled of leather, seawater, and ambition. Certain sagas imply battle musk, the belief that physical exertion and heroic wounds emitted an irresistible aroma. One overly romantic warrior allegedly dabbed fish oil behind his ears to heighten his appeal. He was later ignored at a feast. Love letters lost at sea. Vikings weren't big on paper, but they carved flirtations into wood, bone, and occasionally other people's property. One fragment discovered reads, "Your hair is like fire. Your pigs are well trained. I would cross 10 fjords for you." Messages tied to raven legs never worked. The birds were uncooperative romantically. Flirtation at foreign ports when raiders stopped in coastal towns. Mingling occurred often at mead halls, where courtship began with questions like, "Is this seat taken? And have you heard of Thor?" Trade offered non-violent opportunities for love. Jewelry exchanged. Stories swapped. Toes awkwardly touched under tables. A documented romance began when a Viking offered a foreign woman 3 barrels of barley and moderate emotional availability. Skalds and seaside sonnets. Skalds sometimes composed love verses for raiders, trying to woo strangers in enemy territory. Common themes: the sea, longing, bone carvings, and metaphors involving turnips and thunder. A well-composed poem could win affection or get you chased by a confused goat with strict local customs. Freya, patroness of beauty and desire, was known for her power and her dramatic, love-saturated escapades. Once traded jewelry for affection. Another time rode a chariot, pulled by cats, and ignored advances from frost giants with spectacular sass. Prayed to by mortals seeking romantic success, or just a decent haircut before a feast. Freya, fertility king with surprising anatomical runes. Freyr's most famous love story involves falling for a giantess and sending his servant with an awkward poem and a magic sword, often worshipped using phallic imagery carved into logs. Subtle? No. Iconic? Absolutely. Associated with harvests, romantic courage, and possibly the world's most ambiguous potatoes. Loki, shape-shifting scandal magnet. Loki loved mischief. Also, horses. Once turned into a mare, seduced a stallion, and gave birth to a magical foal. Yes, you read that correctly. known for disguising himself to infiltrate weddings, dodge emotional commitment, and invent sarcasm. Allegedly invented the Viking version of ghosting by turning into smoke mid-breakup. Odin, all-father with 1,000 thoughts, non-romantic. Odin preferred wisdom over romance, but still engaged in dramatic relationships. Once disguised himself to win the love of a human woman by being mysterious and unnecessarily philosophical. Famous for gifting poetry and hangovers in equal measure. Rode an 8-legged horse, which probably complicated dating logistics. Giant romance. Frosty and ill. Giants were often the guilted lovers of Norse mythology. Big hearts, bigger hands, poor communication skills. Many kidnapped Freya offered poetry made of ice and received spears in return. One courtship involved building a wall for the gods in exchange for affection. He wasn't paid. It ended violently. Divine courtships and saga soap opera. Gods flirted via thunderclaps, rune riddles, and weirdly specific challenges like wrestle this sea serpent while reciting my lineage. Many sagas blend romance with chaos. One tale ends with wedding guests turning into wolves, another with someone marrying a rock. Love among gods mirrored Viking values. Awkward negotiation, fiery symbolism, and unresolved tension forever etched into stone. Odin's raven for mantle, said to shimmer with hidden verses and smelled faintly of metaphysical regret. Freya's falcon cloak, let the wearer flee and dramatically exit awkward family feasts, worn not just for warmth, but as declarations of one's soul. Jewelry with personality disorders. Brisingamen, Freya's iconic necklace, forged by dwarves, seductively glowed, judged you silently. Rings often doubled as contracts. One misplaced ring could mean marriage, oath-breaking, or sudden bear transformation. Magic earrings whispered advice, but only about fashion choices. Battle wear, style meets strategy. Helmets adorned with sea feathers, meant to distract enemies or impress thunder gods. Codpieces, enchanted to glow in the presence of deception. And, occasionally, chain mail linked with runes, granting courage or hiccups, depending on alignment. Everyday elegance in mythic times. Wool tunics dyed with fermented lichen bold, itchy, existential. Embroidery often told family sagas. Great Aunt Helga defeated 3 trolls with a ladle. Belts represented status. Wide belts meant bravery. Thin belts meant you likely had a poetic soul. Vanity meets sorcery. Mirrors stolen from forest spirits showed you truths, your destiny, your ideal eyebrow shape, and your ex's unresolved issues. Viking hair gel made from fermented thunderberries gave one the power of the smoldering glance. Viking gods held moots, divine assemblies powered by ale and unresolved tension. Topics ranged from Ragnarok prep schedules to Loki's questionable hobbies. Oaths were sworn with runes and fermented trout. Breaking one could turn you into a decorative shield. Political factions among deities. Odin's philosophical bloc wanted long debates about ethics, destiny, and beard maintenance. Thor's action group proposed that thunder solved most problems. Freya's charm coalition argued for diplomacy via flirtation and interpretive dance. The accidental council of 9 once 9 gods showed up to host different meetings in the same hall. Each had invited giants, spirits, and confused mortals with wildly different agendas. The result, 1 diplomatic summit, 3 duels, a spontaneous bard contest, and to surprise pregnancies, laws, loopholes, and legendary fine print. Low stones held ancient codes. Thou shalt not enchant goats into public officials. Loki once exploited a legal loophole by changing species Freya drafted a treaty entirely in haiku. No one understood it, but all agreed it felt profound. Divine debates and conflict resolution debates included yelling into wind tunnels, challenging enemies to logic battles, and competitive brooding. Valkyries served as moderators armed with spears and passive-aggressive commentary. One feud ended in a dance-off judged by ravens. The ravens abstained. Everyone agreed to pretend it never happened. Shriner, the magical beast, cooked nightly in Valhalla, only to reappear the next day boiled reborn. Delicious. Chefs theorized he had regenerative seasoning or a mild curse of culinary recursion. Flavor profile. Smoky valor with undertones of existential dread. Divine diets and dish disputes. Odin, true to form, subsisted mostly on mead and poetry. Also inhaled wisdom in broth form. Freya adored celestial fruit, once declared war over a stolen plum that sang in falsetto. Thor demanded protein-rich meals laced with lightning, once bit a thunder crab and briefly saw the future. Mead of inspiration. Sip and ramble brewed from the blood of a wise god and honey from argumentative bees. Drinking it granted poetic clarity, occasional hallucinations, and the ability to rhyme unintentionally. Accidentally served to a mortal poet who wrote 5 sonnets about moss and became king for a week. Forbidden foods. Banned but beloved apples of Idun. Rejuvenating. Protected by aggressive squirrels. Loki once swapped a sacred onion stew for prank pudding, unleashing gastrointestinal chaos in Asgard. Bread carved with runes predicted your next lover's mood swings. Culinary diplomacy and gastronomic war. One peace treaty signed using gravy. Another involved a duel using lead. A banquet ended when a sentient tart insulted 3 pantheons. The tart was tried, convicted, and rebranded as a muffin. Gods summoned feasts using enchanted menus. Mispronounce Anne and summon a wrathful eel. Under moon's broken gaze and rue-trapped soil, we descend into tales of the dead that refused silence. Tonight, the saga summons spirits with scandalous secrets and opinions on your choice of shoes. Sire and the Whispering Arts. Viking necromancers, practitioners of Sai, use staffs, chants, and fermented dreams to summon the departed, often required wearing ceremonial wool and speaking backwards while holding a spoon. A once ended early because someone summoned a ghost who had nothing nice to say. Ghosts with opinions. Spirits rarely stayed quiet. Many offered unwanted advice, critiques of funeral outfits, or dramatic gossip from hell. One famous ghost predicted Ragnarok, gave dating tips, then cursed a salad. Ancestors were sometimes summoned during weddings, usually to shame someone into better posture. The rules of resurrection. You can't summon someone already busy. Double-booked ghosts cause time paradoxes and fashion clashes. Disrespecting the dead led to hauntings involving random Viking trivia whispered into dreams. Always knock thrice on a tomb. Once for respect, twice for clarity, thrice for style. Barrow dwellers and grave drama. Some warriors became Duragaran dead protectors of their tombs. Known for mood swings and skeletal sarcasm, they guarded treasure, secrets, and half-written poetry. Banishment rituals involved insulting their fashion sense and fleeing before they replied. Failed moments. A medium wore sandals to a snow-covered ritual. Spirit refused to appear, citing chilly disrespect. Loki impersonated a ghost to spread rumors about Thor's beard routine. An amulet used for summoning turned out to be a cheese token from a mortal market. Spirits were unimpressed. Connects Midgard to Asgard. Sparkles suspiciously. Only works if you're worthy, punctual, and not holding any cursed vegetables. Once rerouted due to a moody storm goddess. Mortals who tried to cross during this reroute were politely turned into fog. Ratchitoska, the messenger with momentum. A cosmic squirrel tasked with delivering messages between the eagle atop Yggdrasil and the worm knowing its roots, accidentally opened a multiverse corridor by mispronouncing an insult in squirrel tongue. That ripple caused 3 alternate realities, one ruled by poetry, one by goats, and one that smells faintly of regret. Magic vessels and vehicular philosophy. Ships crafted from fingernails glided across sky, sea, and occasionally memory. One long ship named the Flammable Misunderstanding hosted gods on a diplomatic voyage. It ended in dance-off and minor singing curses. Valkyries rode winged horses except Bjorn, who insisted on flying goats for aesthetic rebellion. Portals that argued back. Some gateways required riddles, others demanded payment in awkward confessions. A mirror once served as a portal but grew judgmental if your aura clashed with its. Freya opened a door to Alfheim and accidentally invited 17 mosquitoes of destiny. Realm-hopping etiquette. Always bring offerings, feathers of memory, stones of apology, or fermented compliments. Avoid sneezing in Vangam, interpreted as a political statement. Entering Helheim without socks was considered an insult. One barefoot deity caused 5 centuries of awkward poetry. Familiars weren't just mystical sidekicks. They negotiated with nightmares and offered unsolicited advice. One witch's familiar was a depressed raven named Clive, who only spoke in riddles about onions. Some familiars disguised themselves as boots. Their opinions, soulful. Jarmungandor, the world's serpent with existential coils. So long he encircled the earth. So moody he once sulked for a century because someone forgot his birthday. Known for his upcoming role in Ragnarok and his controversial poetry about gravity, binge-watched Midgard civilizations like reality TV, rooting for whichever kingdom had the best bread. The oracle trout of Lake Fumbafjord. Every Thursday, this trout surfaced to deliver prophecy via interpretive bubble patterns. Once predicted the fall of a king, 3 awkward marriages, and a trend in helmet glitter, worshipped by confused sailors and one druid who claimed the fish knew jazz. Loki's beastly entourage among his companions, a talking fox who once declared war on napkins, and a crab with prophetic hives. Loki occasionally turned into animals to avoid responsibility, including a ferret named Mild Discomfort. Familiars summoned during his rituals often refused instructions and demanded snacks. Misunderstood monsters, trolls in forests, artists trapped in brute bodies. One carved existential haiku into trees. Sea serpents who offered transport if you recited your worst childhood memory. A dragon named Snurkula tried stand-up comedy. The audience caught fire. Mixed reviews. The Norns, weavers of what was, what is, and what might be, Erid, past incarnate. War robes stitched with awkward memories. The dandy, present tense, used a loom powered by existential anxiety. Schooled, the maybe future, always had scissors and a mischievous smirk. They spun destiny from threads made of thoughts, feelings, and mildly judgmental fog. Destiny threads, tangled and tempting. Golden thread meant glory, red meant passion. Bureaucracy tangled fates often led to heroism, or overly dramatic monologues. One mortal tried to bribe the Norns with fermented trout. They cursed him with perpetual armpit sweat. The mead-tasting prophecy incident once, during a fat review, the Norns sipped aged mead laced with insight berries. This led to a prophecy declaring, "A king shall fall while wearing itchy socks." 3 monarchs launched sock inquiries. One banned wool, another blamed his tailor. Misreadings and fate faux pas. Mortal seers often misinterpreted signs. One saw a raven sneeze and predicted apocalypse. It was just prophetic dreams included symbols like dancing hammers, whispering pies, and clouds shaped like regrets. Destiny sometimes arrived via carrier goose. The goose had opinions, rewriting fate. Some tried rewriting fate through poetry, interpretive dance, or runic tattoos. Loki once rewrote a prophecy just to win a debate. This created an alternate timeline ruled by musical chairs. Odin attempted to read fate backward. He temporarily became a tree. Winterfest of the unyielding toe held during the darkest nights, involving bonfires, riddles, and ceremonial sock exchanges, meant to honor resilience, snow spirits, and the noble suffering of frozen extremities. Thor once misinterpreted the ritual and smote 3 snowflakes. He later apologized with thunder-themed pastries. Midsummer Riot, celebrated with mead, flower crowns, and declarations of confusing affection. Mortals jumped over fires while reciting their favorite tragedies. One summer, the fire jumped back. It was promoted to minor deity status and began dating a winged spirit, the equinox that forgot itself. Spring once failed to arrive on time due to an overzealous frost sprite named Snorri, who mistook flower buds for intruders. Snorri eventually chilled out after being bribed with pollen-infused cookies, resulted in 6 extra weeks of melancholic poetry and slightly confused birds. Rituals of absurd symbolism. One festival honored me by painting elbows and whispering gratitude to tree bark. Another required participant to wear potato sacks, sing in minor keys, and meditate about cheese. Loki invented a fake holiday involving hats that predicted mood swings. It spread unintentionally to 3 realms. Festival music and accidental summonings. Drums shaped like thunderclouds, often summoned weather instead of rhythm. Flutes carved from ghost would sometimes play themselves and judged your sense of tempo. Once, a bard's off-key chant summoned a philosophical fog that debated metaphysics for 14 hours. Dream vision. Seers, Viking mystics, known as Dromspafok, specialized in prophetic naps. They wore moon-dyed tunics and slept on pillows stuffed with riddled feathers. One famed seer dreamed of a golden spoon that caused an empire's fiscal collapse. The empire did not exist. The goose that whispered truth. Midgard legend tells of Henkiel, a goose blessed with sentience via accidental enchantment. Every night, she waddled into dreams bearing existential advice and the occasional weather forecast. once consulted by gods during a celestial debate. Her answer was maybe, and reality adjusted accordingly. Sleepwalking across realms, Thor once dream-walked into Moselhe, mistook lava for bread, and woke up craving toast. Loki invented somnambulistic pranks. One involved swapping all dream furniture with metaphorical furniture. Freya's sleep self ran a dream bakery whose pastries revealed childhood secrets. Incantations of the half-asleep enchanted mutterings during slumber sometimes summoned storms, summoned socks, or summoned deeply embarrassing poetry. One Viking sleep chanter composed a saga entirely in snores. It won a ghostly literature award. A warrior named Bela recited an ancient spell while sleep. Result: 3 bilingual geese, 1 philosophical cucumber, and a temporary moon hiccup. Dream portals and midnight mishaps. Certain fjords mirrored stars only at midnight, opening dream gates for bold napsters. Entering a dream gate without sandals caused you to relive your worst pun attempts. Odin's dream once leaked into the waking world, resulting in a temporary rise in beard-themed riddles. The Spoon of Oblivion, an ancient artifact set to stir the universe's memory, forged by bored gods and polished with cosmic sighs. Those who held it experienced flashbacks of lives they never lived. One bard wept over a marriage to a cloud. It only spoke once. Never stir porridge with purpose. Forbidden books and sentient paragraphs. Shelves in the library between breaths contain texts that rearrange themselves when judged. One tome bites reader who skip chapters. Another rewrites itself, mid-thought, depending on the reader's guilt level. Loki once edited a sacred text to include a shopping list. It caused reality to briefly crave pickles. Translating silence. The bird choir of Shushheim. In one hidden glade, birds perform silent songs, only interpretable by those who've forgotten their own names. Their choreography includes wing flaps synchronized with emotional regrets. One goose conveyed the meaning of eternity through synchronized blinking. The audience fell asleep amid metaphysical misfires and accidental revelations. A druid once asked, "What is truth?" while sneezing into a bowl of prophetic lentils. The universe responded with laughter. Freya uncovered the formula for emotional gravity, then misplaced it under her pillow. It resurfaced as a bedtime story in Alf. A seer dreaming of fire saw instead a candle sobbing quietly in a thunderstorm. The candle later became a teacher. Knowledge that forgets you back some truths, once learned, erased the learner from all cheese-based memories. One rune whispers all answers but only 2 rocks with deep insecurities. Odin, upon touching a forbidden sigil, became briefly allergic to metaphors. And so, the candle sputtered its last flicker, letting shadows stretch and yawn across the worn pages and peculiar relics. The Spoon of Oblivion nestled into its velvet pouch, humming lullabies only dreams could decipher. The sentient paragraphs relaxed their fonts, curling like cats beside warm metaphors. Outside, the bird choir of Shushheim folded their wings, silence stretching into a soft crescendo that draped itself over every wandering thought. Reality herself, a bit weary from so many riddles, exhaled gently and tucked in the stars, as the library between breaths locked its final sigh inside a dusty drawer. One lone rune whispered a bedtime pun to a sleepy rock, and it giggled just once before snoring in metaphysical Morse code. Tonight, knowledge slept in spoons, truth blinked softly from cloud, and Manet's saga tiptoed into slumber, curled beside a candle that once cried in thunder. Tomorrow, perhaps we'll ask fate what it dreams of when it's not being watched. Good night. Strange story. You were weirdly wonderful.